sex, guns, and money.
So the only pushback I've seen on the news of this lawsuit, and I just, this was a good platform for you to address it. Again, I'm not one that necessarily believes in coincidences, unless if it happens at a big level. But I think the majors, Major League Baseball's timing of, again, this retraction of a handful of minor league teams, I don't think you can avoid the optics that this might be related. And I see it a lot in my replies. I see people saying, maybe this lawsuit will lead to more money for players, but there will be less jobs for the players. What do you have to say on, I guess, this balancing act? Would you rather have a minor league which has more jobs but less pay, or less jobs and more pay?
Well, I think that's a bit of a false choice. I've heard people try to link the two. I will say this: I heard people in baseball talking about this idea even, back the last years that I was playing. People had talked about shrinking the minor leagues for a long time. And those talks accelerated once you had more business-minded people running baseball. Because, all of a sudden, it was about not just about winning anymore, but about maximizing profits while you're winning and trying to see, how little you can spend while still winning 100 games. That's the goal for any modern general manager at this point. And so, with that in mind, I think this was all, the contraction was already in the works. And, if anything, blame COVID-19 instead of me for this. Because COVID-19 really did push things along too, because it made the minor league owners powerless to combat it. It was a just terrible, terrible year if you're a minor league owner. At the same time, I also reject the notion that Major League Baseball has to cut teams, has to cut the number of players in order to pay the basic minimum wage. Like, we aren't talking about a huge sum of money here. Like, we're talking about the same laws that McDonald's and Walmart routinely comply with. A full-time minimum wage worker in this country makes $15,000 a year. That's what we're talking about. Surely Major League Baseball can find a way to pay their players just your basic minimum wage. And so, the notion that they had to cut teams and cut players because of this, I just don't buy it at all. I think it's an excuse, and I think it was already in the works, and they're just using it as an excuse to force it through.
Yeah, Garrett, I've read in The Athletic or in Fangraphs somewhere that if Major League Baseball paid the minimum wage to all affected minor league players, we're talking about a pot of money that's somewhere in the neighborhood of between $5.5 and $6 million annually, total, all in, divided by 30 some odd teams. You're looking at an amount of basically a couple $100,000 per
minimum
team.
wage player.
Yeah, so not even, less than that. So why do you think Major League Baseball wants to sort of die on that hill when the amount of money at issue really isn't an industry changer? It's just another added cost, but it's one that seems manageable, in proportion or in scale to the kind of money Major League Baseball is bringing in through all these different verticals, and it's a relatively small expense. So why fight it?
I think you've already answered that question, and I don't know why. That's one I've sat around thinking about a lot for the past years, and I do not get it. I don't understand. I think you're exactly right. The sum of money that we're talking about is not huge in a $10 billion industry with, exponential revenue growth. Surely they didn't, sure, they didn't take in the revenue that they usually take in this year, obviously not. But with the TV contracts that they have kicking in, they just signed a new one with, for the playoffs, for instance, that I believe is going to give them over $500 million a year to be divided between the 30 teams. That is a lot of money. Take a small chunk of that and do the right thing, and pay your minor league players enough where they can eat at Applebee's instead of McDonald's every day.
Just a quick follow-up, then I'll give it back to Dan. We all can sit here and wonder what baseball's logic was, but again, the act that Congress passed was by baseball, Save America's Pastime Act. So I don't think baseball is going to go bankrupt if they have to pay $6 million. I'm pretty sure that's just one additional contract that they have to eat. And we know that teams have given out $20 million contracts that have not panned out. So maybe there's something bigger behind the scenes that we're not aware of. But again, that's the name of the act. Save America's pastime, save baseball to not pay minor leaguers. So I think it's important, the name that baseball chose for this.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a long week in my life when that passed. I got a call from a Washington Post reporter on a Sunday night about 8:30 at night. And it was not a sports reporter. It was their Capitol Hill reporter. And he says, what can you tell me about this Save America's Pastime Act? I'm like, what? I thought that thing was dead. Because, when it was first introduced, I think way back in 2016. And it didn't go anywhere. Was just shelved, put aside, started collecting dust, never got a committee hearing. And then all of a sudden, 2 years later, there's an omnibus spending bill that has to pass within like 5 days for the government to stay open. And all of a sudden, that's what the Washington Post reporter was talking about, that they tacked this thing on to this omnibus spending bill and end up being on page 1,967 of this bill. And, the way those omnibus spending bills are negotiated, it's just, it's just leadership is involved. So the rank and file didn't even know that this thing was in it. They didn't even know what they voted on. I ran into Senator Claire McCaskill, shortly after it passed, and she voted no because she said she always voted no on omnibus bills like that because they load them up with all kinds of things. It is the exact opposite of how our democracy should function. But yeah, so she voted no, and she admitted that she didn't even realize it was in there. And most of the people that voted yes probably didn't. So this is something affecting the lives of thousands of people, and nobody even knew it was in there.
Yeah, could we possibly be unsaving America's pastime if there's a change in power in the White House and the November elections basically lead to a President Biden and a Democratic majority in the House and in the Senate? Is this something that could be revisited just simply by reverting back to the way things were? Is that something that you're optimistic about achieving? Because I would imagine you've thought about this, given the political dynamic.
Well, not to be cynical, but it's tough to get a bill passed. It's also tough to get a bill unpassed, and I think Major League Baseball shows that it takes a lot of money, it takes a lot of clout, and funding those lobbyists isn't cheap. So I'm not optimistic, but at the same time, I would love to see a movement come together to try to do just that. And one thing the nonprofit that I co-founded, Advocates for Minor Leaguers, is going to be looking at is educating some of these congressmen about the ills of that act. There's a congressional task force right now that's been formed that's investigating the contraction of minor league baseball. Well, at the same time, they also need to be investigating the Save America's Pastime Act. They can't ignore that because that's something that was their making.
Yeah.